For over 50 years, a 600-ton giant sat in silence. Not broken, not destroyed, just forgotten. Its iron body covered in dust, its power reduced to memory. Once it ruled the rails. Now it stood still, like time itself had abandoned it. But this wasn't just any machine. This was Union Pacific Big Boy 4014, one of the most powerful steam locomotives ever built. A symbol of American strength and engineering at its absolute peak. Beneath the rust and fading paint, its massive frame still stretched longer than most city blocks. 600 tons of steel, wheels taller than a man, pistons built like industrial giants, and at its core, a design that changed history. The legendary 4884 configuration, not built for beauty, built for power. Back in the early 1940s, America faced a serious problem. The Wasatch Mountains, steep, cold, unforgiving. Freight trains struggled to climb. Engines failed under pressure. And during wartime, failure was not an option. So the call went out, build something stronger, faster, unstoppable. And the answer came from Alco. They didn't just build a locomotive. They built a monster, 25 machines, each one capable of pulling massive loads through mountains where others gave up. Coal burned like firestorms inside their boilers. Crews worked in brutal conditions, snow, smoke, and endless climbs. But these giants kept moving. They carried war supplies. They powered a nation. They became legends. But progress is ruthless. By the late 1950s, diesel engines took over. Cleaner, cheaper, easier. And just like that, the age of steam ended. Big Boy 4014 was retired. No dramatic finale. No farewell, just silence. 2013, a quiet meeting. A simple table. A decision. That would change everything. On paper, it looked ordinary. A few signatures. A formal agreement. But in reality, it was the beginning of something almost impossible. Union Pacific made a promise. They would bring Big Boy 4014 back to life, not as a display, not as a memory, but as a living, moving legend. The deal was struck with the museum in Pomona, California. In exchange for another historic locomotive, 4014 would go home, back to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where legends were built. But there was one massive problem. The giant hadn't moved in over 50 years. Its wheels were frozen in time. Its systems long dead. Its weight, over 600 tons. Moving it wasn't just difficult. It was a logistical nightmare. The road alone stretched nearly 1,400 miles. Across cities, across deserts, across mountains. Every inch had to be planned. Engineers inspected the rails ahead. Bridges were checked for strength, curves measured for clearance, because one mistake could end everything. To even begin, crews had to build temporary track panels, carefully guiding the locomotive inch by inch out of its resting place. No sudden moves, no second chances. Then finally, it happened. 4014 moved. Not under its own power, not yet, but it rolled. Pulled by modern diesel engines, the giant began its journey across America. And something incredible followed. People came from everywhere. Families stood by the tracks. Kids climbed fences for a better view. Rail fans waited for hours just to see it pass. Cameras flashed, flags waved. Some people cheered. Others just stood there in silence, taking it in. For many, this wasn't just a train. It was history, moving right in front of them. Older generations wiped away tears because they remembered. They remembered when machines like this ruled the rails. And now, it was moving again. But the journey wasn't easy. There were delays, mechanical checks, unexpected problems. At one point, even a tender truck derailment. Every stop became a moment of tension and a moment of connection. Because everywhere it went, the giant brought people together, and mile by mile, across heat, wind, and endless tracks, 4014 kept moving forward, until finally, after days of careful travel, it arrived. Cheyenne, Wyoming. But this wasn't the end of the journey. It was just the beginning. Bringing Big Boy 4014 to Cheyenne was only step one. Now came the real challenge: rebuilding a legend. The moment it entered the shop, reality hit. This wasn't restoration. This was reinvention. The building itself wasn't ready. The Big Boy was simply too big. Ceilings were torn down. Walls were cut open. Dust filled the air as decades-old structures were ripped apart to make space. Sunlight finally poured inside, revealing the true scale of the machine. Massive, overwhelming, unforgiving. Then came the upgrade that changed everything: a 40-ton overhead crane. Steel beams were lifted into place, bolted, aligned, reinforced. For the first time, crews could lift entire sections of the locomotive: wheels, boiler parts, heavy assemblies. The shop transformed from an old repair shed into an industrial powerhouse. But the real work, it was inside the machine, deep within the boiler, where heat once raged like a furnace. Now there was silence and decay. Workers crawled inside through narrow openings, flashlights cutting through darkness, every inch inspected, every flaw exposed. Using ultrasonic tools, engineers measured the thickness of the steel. Corrosion had eaten away at critical areas. Weak spots lit up like warning signals. Then came one of the toughest jobs: replacing the stay bolts. Nearly 500 of them, each one holding the firebox together, each one essential. There were no shortcuts. Bolts had to be cut out, hammered loose, and replaced by hand. Hours turned into days, days into months, sweat, heat, exhaustion. But slowly, the giant came back to life. Then another problem emerged: the suspension system. The original springs, built in the 1940s, were cracked beyond repair. No modern manufacturer made anything like them. So the team did the impossible. They built new ones, using modern steel, custom designs, and old blueprints from Alco. Each spring was forged, heat-treated, tested under extreme pressure, 18,000 pounds of force. And still, they had to hold. Failure wasn't an option. Finally, everything came down to one moment: the pressure test. The boiler was sealed, filled with water, and slowly, pressure began to rise. Higher, higher! Every person in the room held their breath. If something failed, it would all be over. Seconds felt like hours. And then, nothing broke. Nothing leaked. Nothing failed. For the first time in decades, Big Boy 4014 was alive again, on the inside. But one final step remained, the most important one of all. After years of work, thousands of hours, and relentless effort, it all came down to this moment. Not steel, not bolts, not machines. Fire. But this wasn't the 1940s anymore. Things had changed. The Big Boy would not burn coal again. Instead, it would run on fuel oil, cleaner, more efficient, more controllable, a modern solution for a historic giant. New systems were installed, precision-engineered burners, custom fuel lines, everything designed to bring the giant back, safely. And then, the day arrived, April 9th, 2019. Inside the cab, crew members stood in silence. No one spoke, no one moved. A single command was given. Fuel began to flow. A thin stream of oil entered the burner. Steam atomized it into a fine mist. Then, a spark. For a split second, nothing. And then, whoom! Flames erupted inside the firebox. Bright orange, alive, hungry. The steel began to react, popping, creaking, expanding. After decades of silence, the giant had a heartbeat again. Steam slowly built inside the boiler, pressure rising, energy returning. Outside the shop, word spread fast. People gathered along the tracks, cameras ready, hearts racing, because everyone knew something historic was about to happen. And then, it did. May 1st, 2019. For the first time in nearly 60 years, Big Boy 4014 moved under its own power. Not pulled, not pushed, driven by steam. The wheels turned, slow at first, then steady. A deep mechanical rhythm filled the air. The sound of power reborn. Steam poured into the sky. The whistle echoed across Wyoming, loud, sharp, unforgettable. People cheered, some shouted, others just stood there, watching history come back to life. This wasn't just a test run, this was proof. Proof that something once thought impossible was now real. But the journey wasn't over yet, because the world was waiting to see it.